Hi, this is Muho on July 31st, 2020 in Osaka. The last couple of English videos I uploaded to YouTube were mostly long philosophical talks, and this one is gonna be another one of those. So if you hate those kind of videos, stop viewing right now. If on the other hand, videos like these inspire you, or you enjoy this kind of videos, you can also go back to a series of videos that I uploaded in the past. One of them is called God and Zen, or Zen and God, and that one was inspired by a video that Brad Warner uploaded a couple of years ago. And then there's a whole series of talks on the topic, who am I? And those videos were inspired by books by a philosopher, Japanese philosopher, whose name is Hitoshi Nagai. Unfortunately, right now none of his works are translated into English, or at least not in print. So that's would be his name. Nagai is the family name, Hitoshi is his first name. So in the Western order it would be like this. He has a Facebook, not a Facebook page, but a Wikipedia page, and if you go to the bottom of the Wikipedia page, you can also find links to PDF files of 2 complete English translations of his books. They are quite difficult books, but if you're interested in what Nagai writes and his kind of thoughts, I can recommend that you go to the Wikipedia page and maybe click on the links there. There's also this very small Japanese volume, and the subtitle, the English subtitle is Philosophy for Children 40 Dialogue, for some reason in the singular. I've been translating this into German, so if you read German, then at one point in the future you can probably buy this book in stores in Germany. Very interesting philosophy, and at least for me. The question that Nagai has dealt with for most of his life, 50 years or so, is the question, why am I me? Why am I this person? And well, that seems to be a very stupid question. Well, if I wouldn't be this person, then I would be somebody else, and I might ask myself, as this other person, why am I me? So why is a banana? Because if it wouldn't be a banana, it would be a pineapple or something else. Of course, Nagai is aware of that kind of criticism, but the question is actually not why is a banana, or why is a pineapple, but why am I me? And in the English language, you can already see there's a difference here. In German and in other languages, even in Japanese, this difference on the surface disappears. In German, it would just be warum bin ich ich. It would be the same ich here. In Japanese, the word for I is watashi. Well, one interesting thing about the Japanese language is that there's actually more than a dozen words for I, for the first pronoun. For example, for male speakers, the most common ones are watashi, boku, ore. But then there's lots, and also there's some pronouns that would only be used by female speakers. Watashi can be used by both male and female speakers. But for example, inside a Japanese family, neither the parents nor the kids usually refer to themselves as watashi, even if they refer to themselves and using the first pronoun, because it's just too neutral. So usually when you speak Japanese, you want to put yourself into context. You want to relate to the other person, and you do that by choosing a certain pronoun. Some pronouns you can only use when you're talking to somebody who's your peer. Others you can only use if they're kind of your subordinates, so to speak. Some pronouns would be most natural if you're talking to your childhood buddies, while other pronouns sound only natural if you're writing the text, but they would sound very unnatural if you're speaking them. But, well, in this context, the most natural word to use in Japanese would be watashi. And both for the I and me, it would be watashi. So the Japanese would be naze watashi ga watashi nano ka. And to express the difference between the two watashis, between the I and the me, what Nagai uses is two kinds of brackets. These brackets and this brackets. In Japanese, these are called yamakakko, brackets that look like, well, like a mountain. Maybe a little bit triangular brackets, and these ones are just normal corners. The watashi with the corners is the me, and the one with the triangular brackets is the I. What's the difference between these two? The other day, Brett Warner, I think it was on his Twitter account, maybe on YouTube, but I think it was Twitter, he posted an interview between Leonard Cohen and an Indian guru, and I forgot the name. I think it's a very famous Advaita Vedanta teacher. And the Indian guru said, well, it's one of the marvelous things about the English language that you can express this difference between the I and the me, and even the Indian languages don't have this ability to express the difference. And what the guru said in the interview was that only the I really exists, while the me does not exist. And Brett Warner seemed to agree with this, while I think it's the other way around. I would say that only the me exists, while the I does not exist. But which one is right and which one is wrong depends on the definition of what you call existing. So if you define existing in a different way, then of course you could say that Brad is right. Some of you, hopefully all of you who watch this video know that not too long ago I did an interview with Brett Warner through Zoom, and I uploaded it on YouTube. And the reason I did this interview is that I was interviewed myself last year by someone called Thorsten Hesan. He did interviews with 12 different European teachers, 10 of them German, 2 of them French, and you can see the film that resulted from this, also on YouTube with English subtitles. If you go to this, or if you search for this, Blueprints for Zen Practice, 2-hour film. This film again is inspired by a film that's already, I think, a decade old or longer. Interviews with Indian Advaita Vedanta teachers, and also another version with European Advaita Vedanta teachers. And the first question in all of these films to all of the teachers is, who are you? Who are you? So I asked this question to Brett Warner the other day, and he asked me back, which answer do you want to hear? The normal answer or the Zen answer? And basically, well, what he's asking there is, do you want to hear about me? Or do you want to hear about the I? To tell somebody about the me, well, this is me, would be the normal answer. If you try to explain something about the I, that would be the so-called Zen answer, or the spiritual answer. And Brett Warner, in the end, first he gave the normal answer, which I thought was pretty cool, because normally when we talk in a spiritual context, we tend to forget about the me, and we always want to talk about the true self, so to speak, the I, the real I. In most of the interviews in the Blueprints for Zen Practice film, the teachers, including myself, say more about the I aspect than the me aspect. Although, when I'm invited for talk somewhere, and it's the first time I'm giving a talk in a certain group, in a certain Zen center, then often I spend the whole talk, 90 minutes or so, talking only about me, myself. So I give the so-called normal answer, which would be, I was born in 1968 in West Berlin. At the time was still surrounded by the wall. When I was 7 years old, my mother died, and pretty soon I asked myself, what's the meaning of life? If I have to die one day, why do I have to go to school, do homework? And none of the grown-ups could give me a good answer to that question. And then when I was 16, I encountered the Zen, and today I'm sitting here in my chair in Osaka. And, well, in between, there's enough stuff to fill 90 minutes. And all of that would be an answer to the question, who are you? But the so-called normal answer, which doesn't mean it's a bad answer. It's the true answer. But the other answer, who am I, would be an answer to the question, well, who is it that is living as Muho right now? Who is it who's asking himself, why am I me? Who's watching this video right now? Who is listening to this voice right now? You could also try to explain the difference between these two meanings of I and me by talking about the now. What is now? As I said in the beginning of this video, now is July 31st. That's the meaning of now. But when you watch this video, it might be a completely different day. Is it the same now, or is it different now? Well, it's a different now, obviously. But the difference between the now that you're watching this video and my now isn't simply the difference between, say, July 31st and August 1st. Those are completely different days. But the difference between a now that you didn't give a date and this now, the difference is, well, that this now is what's actually there. This is actually happening right now. Without any relation to the date. It could be any date. I am what is conscious of this right now. And, well, it's Muho. It's Muho is conscious of this, but when I'm talking about Muho, it's already part of the consciousness. I'm talking about part of this. When I'm saying today is July 31st, I'm already talking about a date inside the now. It doesn't really get to the real now, so that in Japanese, now you write with this character, and you read it ima, ima. This is watashi. Ima. And if you can give a date, attach a date to this ima, it would be the ima in these cornered brackets. But if we're talking about, for example, when I ask the question, why is today July 31st? I don't mean to ask, why is July 31st July 31st? That's not what I want to ask. I want to ask, why is today, why is now July 31st? In that case, I'm talking about this now in these triangular brackets. So to understand the question that all of this Nagai's philosophy is about, you need to understand, of course, first the difference here between the I and the me, or the two different meanings of now. Can you locate the now on the linear string of time, or is this linear time actually part of the now? Which now are you talking about? And of course, these two in our daily lives, they relate to each other. So when I'm talking about myself, or I'm asking myself the question, why am I myself? And I do this towards the camera, and I'm intending to upload this later on YouTube, then I'm of course aware that I am not only this, all of this, but I'm actually also this person, Muho. And there's another person on the other side of the screen, so to speak, who's watching this, who is not me. On the other hand, when I'm asking the question, who am I? I'm not asking myself, who is Muho? I know to a pretty good degree who Muho is. Probably there's also a lot I don't know about Muho, about his subconsciousness and other stuff. But that's not what the question is about. I'm asking myself, well, who is this? Where does the question come from? Who is asking this question. And I get to the realization that at that moment, what manifests itself in this moment, there's nothing outside. There's nothing outside of this I, and nothing outside of this now. But if that would be the whole truth, it would make no sense to talk about it and to later upload it to YouTube. Whom do I try to reach by this? Whom am I talking to in the first place? Am I just talking to myself? In a way you could say yes, but only in a way, because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense to make the detour over YouTube, over the internet, to communicate with myself. And the reason why I'm sitting down right now here and making this video is because one topic that's related to the question, who am I, or this philosophy of Hitoshi Nagai, is the question, is there any such thing as free will? Do we have a free will? And a lot of modern philosophers say there is no such thing as free will. It's just an illusion. And brain scientists have actually proven there can be no such thing as free will. Most famous is probably an experiment by a guy called Libet. He asked people to move their finger whenever they wanted. So they could decide when they moved their finger. They were asked to also look on a clock and then later tell the person who did the experiment when they decided to move the finger, or when they felt that now they want to move the finger. And what they found out was actually that the signal to move the finger was sent, well, so to speak, was sent from the brain half a second before they thought that they want to move their finger. So to speak, the brain wanted to move the finger half a second before the consciousness wanted to move the finger. I'm sure you could put this a little bit into better philosophical terms, but basically that's one of the reasons why many philosophers and especially scientists would tell you, well, there's no such thing as free will. How could it be? How could it, for example, be that the consciousness moves matter? Matter and consciousness are on completely different levels. So how would this conscious self up here be able to move matter in the first place? Only matter can move matter. Of course, you could also answer the other question, well, how then is it possible for the brain to produce this consciousness? How does matter produce or move a consciousness? And I've the feeling that for Buddhism, in a certain sense, the theory that we have no free will comes in pretty handy. It's quite convenient for us Buddhists, because sometimes we have difficulties to explain to others the teaching, the Buddhist teaching, that there's no self. Because, well, who's talking right now then? Or other people would say, well, if I eat a piece of chocolate, it tastes great. And, well, if I wouldn't exist, who would feel the taste of the chocolate then? And, well, obviously I can raise my hand as I want. So somebody's moving this hand here, obviously. How could that be if there's no self? So the theory that actually when you raise your hand, there's nobody who's raising this hand. You don't do that out of a free will. There is nobody to have this free will in the first place. Comes in quite handy to explain this theory. So it's maybe interesting to know that already 2,500 years ago in India there were people who said any such thing as a free will or effort that you make, for example, to improve yourself, to change yourself, or to attain enlightenment and finally nirvana, none of this is possible because there's no free will. One of these philosophers had the name Makkhali, and what he said, and that's quoted in one of the Buddhist sutras, is the following. I will put links to all of this down here, but this is a quote from the Sutta Pitaka. Just as when a ball of string is cast forth, it will spread out just as far and no farther, then it can unwind. Just so, both fools and wise alike, wandering in transmigration, exactly for the allotted term, shall then, and only then, make an end of pain. So in modern terms, that would be called determinism. You cannot change your fate. You cannot change what has been determined at the beginning of time. So in Buddhist terms, eventually you might attain the goal of being liberated from suffering, but even that is not done through free will and effort, but it's going to happen when it's going to happen, just as a ball of string, or you could say clockwork. A clockwork it was wound up by God or by karma or whatever at the beginning of time, and all of us are just like clockworks that unwind as they are determined to unwind in the first place. So again, this is something that we can find in the Buddhist sutras, and it comes out of the mouth of a philosopher by the name of Makkhali. But Buddha, in no unclear terms, refutes this view. So Buddha refutes the view that there's no free will. Again, I'm quoting from the sutras. I do not know of any other to cause such harm, unpleasantness and evil as this foolish man Makkhali. Just as a net cast at the mouth of a river is for the harm and destruction of many fish, he is born in the world for the harm, unpleasantness and bad luck of many gods and men. And those words come out of the mouth of Shakyamuni Buddha. So what Shakyamuni Buddha basically says, no effort is possible. You can arouse Bodhi mind and decide to change the course of your life. The logical question is, of course, well, if there's no self, who does this? Who does this effort? Who's arousing Bodhi mind? If there's no self to arouse Bodhi mind. On the theoretical level, the theory of no free will seems to make complete sense. If everything is determined by karma or by natural laws or by whatever, it would be strange if only up here in my brain there's a small self that's shifting the levers and pushing buttons and changing the course of karma, or that's changing the course of the world, so to speak. On the other hand, practically, when we lead our daily lives, probably even the most convinced adherents of determinism, even those philosophers who insist that there can be no free will, when they, well, think about what they want to have for dinner, for example, or when they, for example, try to educate their kids, speak and act in ways that would make us and maybe even themselves think that, well, actually I'm acting just as if I had free will. Which is strange. If there's no such thing as free will, where does this illusion come from? And, well, shouldn't we get rid of the illusion then and just live our lives as if we had no free will? And a determinist probably would answer to this question, well, there is no choice. You have no choice. You have no choice but to live your life as if you had free will, because you're determined in that way. But again, the question is, well, why? Why would such a strange thing happen? That we have to live our lives as if we had free will, if we don't have free will. Very strange, very strange. To get back to Nagai's philosophy, to explain to people what this I with the triangular brackets is, or if you go to Wikipedia and you go to the English PDFs, in the English translations you find this term, I with an exclamation mark. That's what the English translator chose for the Japanese, this watashi. That's the Japanese, that's the English translation, I exclamation mark. Nagai invites his readers to thought experiments like this. For example, let's suppose there's a parallel world, and in that parallel world everything is happening just the same as in this world. So over there Muho is talking to the camera just like this, at exactly this moment, and you're actually watching Muho say exactly the same stuff that he's saying in this world. And let's suppose that the only difference between the parallel world and this world is that in the parallel world Muho is not me. He's the same person with the same DNA, he has the same parents, he has the same life, he even has the same thoughts and says the same things. The only difference over there is that Muho is not me. Would it make any difference? And the answer is it would make no difference, of course. At least to you wouldn't even notice a difference. Now let's make another thought experiment. In this world and in the parallel worlds, Muho says the same thing, and there's also the same you watching. Except that over there in the parallel world, the person who's watching this right now, he has the same body, the same DNA, he's hearing the same voice, and maybe thinking the same stuff that he's thinking right now, except that he's not you. So the same body over there, even the same consciousness over there, it's just that it's not your actual consciousness over there. Would it make any difference? Well, it wouldn't make any difference to me at least, but it would make a difference to you. Only this world is real, while the parallel world, although everything, the exact same stuff happens in the parallel world, it wouldn't be real, it wouldn't exist. In the same sense, what I said about Muho, being me in this world and not being me in the parallel world, that means that for me, the parallel world doesn't exist. While for you, the parallel world where Muho is not Muho is exactly the same world. It's the real world. There's no difference. And these thought experiments seem to imply that there's no free will, because in the parallel world, Muho would say and do just exactly the same stuff that he's doing in this world, regardless of if he's me or not. So me would be the same regardless of if me is I or if me is not I. And of course the same is true for you. You would probably be watching exactly the same YouTube videos and like them or unlike them over here and over there. So then there can be no free will. On the other hand, in a book that I'm just reading, that's Nagai's most recent book. It came out 2 years ago. Japanese title is not easy to translate, but it's basically, well, this came out in 2016. This is easy to translate. The Japanese title is Sonsai Tochikan, which means being and time, originally by Heidegger. And the subtitle is Philosophical Investigations 1. And that's originally by Wittgenstein. So he's stealing the titles of two of the most famous works of the 20th century, philosophical works. And that's basically the second part, Philosophical Investigations 2, it says here. But the main title is, in Japanese, it would be Sekai no Dokusai Teki Sonsai Kozo. Dokusai Lon Teki, Dokusai Lon Teki, Dokusai Lon is translated into English by his English translator as solipsity, which isn't an English word, of course. In philosophy, there's the term solipsism. Solipsism means that there's only me, there are no other minds. I'm the only conscious being in the universe. I suspect that it's a theory that only few people subscribe to, because it's hard to sustain a normal daily life if you think that you're the only conscious being in the universe. But also it's a quite attractive theory in that, well, most people don't believe in Santa Claus because, well, you can't prove Santa Claus. You don't believe in the Easter Bunny because, at least at one point as a kid, you realize, well, there's no such thing. And, well, nobody can prove to you that the Easter Bunny still exists. And for the same reason, I could imagine that a lot of people stop to believe in God. Of course, there could be such a thing as God, but can you prove it? No. So why believe it? But then, if you are consistent, you should also not believe in the existence of other conscious beings, because how can you prove that? Wouldn't it be more simple to just assume that all of the other people are just robots that behave like normal human beings, with the only difference that obviously they're not conscious? Because if they were conscious, how come that there is no awareness of that consciousness? Obviously there's only one person right now, here, that's conscious. That would be solipsism. And solipsity means that, well, right now there's only existence. Right now, the only thing that is here is existence. And, well, one important question is, of course, well, how does this existence, that is everything, relate to the I and the me? In a way, you could say, I am this existence. But then how come that at the same time I'm also muho, which is only a part of existence? To come back, there's one thing I wanted to say in the beginning that I forgot to say in the beginning, but I'm gonna say it now. I said this is what Nagai uses for I. Why am I me? That's the I. And obviously in the beginning what he wanted to use is this. So he wanted to write it like this, but his publisher told him, well, we can't print this. So he decided to split this this X into two halves, and one half went here, this half went here, and that half went there. So it became this. And the hint where he got this from was obviously from Derrida, a French philosopher. And Derrida, you can find this on Wikipedia, and I will put the link down here. Derrida called this method surature, and which means under erasure. And obviously he again got it from Heidegger. For Heidegger, the big question was what is being? And well, in this case, in German, being is always written with a capital letter, but in English, in this case, you should probably write it with a capital letter, because being is not just referring to some being here, but to, well, the only being. And Heidegger was often criticized, of course criticized, to the effect that, well, you can't ask this question. That's a question that you can impossibly ask, because how can being something that exists? You are asking a question about being as if being in itself would be something that exists, but being does not exist. And of course Heidegger was perfectly aware of that fact. There's a German philosopher who's popular these days. His name is Marcus Gabriel, and I never read any of his books so far, but one of his theses that made him popular is obviously the world does not exist. So I'm not quite sure what he means by this, but it seems to me that he's meaning exactly the same thing. Of course, I exist, you exist, the stars and the moon and the sun exist, and love exists, and democracy exists, but they can only exist because they exist in the world. The world cannot exist because for the world to exist, the world would need to be part of the world. Or if the whole universe would be one plate, then the cheese and the bread on the plate of course exist, but the plate itself does not exist, because only what is sitting on the plate exists. So it would be kind of nonsense if the bread and the cheese have a discussion about the existence of the plate. And the same is true about the I and the me. That's why it's so difficult to talk about the I, because the I does not exist. The me exists. And that's what I tried to say in the beginning when I said the Indian guru said it's the other way around. Only the I exists and the me doesn't. And the reason why, well, probably both of us are trying to say the same thing is because for the Indian guru, everything in the phenomenal world is just an illusion. So the cheese and the bread don't really exist, but the plate exists. I would say, well, let's use the terms in the normal way and say the cheese and the bread perfectly exist, but the only thing that doesn't exist is the plate. But still, we can't stop talking about the plate. Or in the case of Heidegger, of course you can't ask this question, but at the same time, there is this feeling of wonder and surprise, but something exists. The world exists. I am here. Why am I here? And this feeling of surprise is not about, I'm not surprised that Muho is there. I'm surprised that I am there. And somehow I'm Muho. But the reason that Muho is there can be probably explained. My parents met each other 55 years ago or so, and they fell in love and they had sex, and then I was born. But that doesn't explain why I am here. So what Heidegger then did is he crossed this out. But crossing it out doesn't mean that he would not have used the word, but he's writing it down, he's crossing it out, and then he's publishing it like this in the book. So basically, he's admitting you cannot say it, but I have to say what I cannot say. And well, in Derrida's case, it became this method of surature, and Nagai then used it. So basically, what this is trying to refer to is this. It's the I that actually cannot be said, but somehow you have to talk about it, or Nagai actually spent 50 years of his life talking about it. And you could make that connection here to the young Wittgenstein, who at the end of his Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus said, what is it in English? What you cannot talk about, where about, you cannot, sorry. It's something like, what you cannot talk about, you have to be silent. You have to be silent about those things you cannot talk about. Very famous, you might look it up. The interesting thing is that according to Wittgenstein, this sentence in itself belongs into the category of things that you cannot say. You cannot speak about the things you cannot speak about. But when he says, be silent about what you cannot speak about, he already speaks about what you cannot speak about. So even Wittgenstein couldn't shut up when, according to his own philosophy, he should have shut up. Back to the topic of free will. In the parallel world, where Muho is not me, he says and does exactly the same what I'm saying and doing right now. So obviously, I cannot have free will. But interestingly, Nagai says in this work it's actually free will, the concept of free will, that connects us to the world, or in my case to Muho. Although that when I'm asking myself, why am I me, why am I Muho, I'm somehow disconnecting myself, I'm taking a distance there. At the end of the day, I can only express this question through Muho's mouth, I can only think with Muho's head. And if Muho moves his arm, for example, I'm moving that arm. So, well, one question that Nagai often asks is, how do you know who you are? There's 7 billion human beings in the world, and probably much more other conscious beings. How do you know which one of those you are? How do you know which consciousness you are? And the answer is pretty simple. Well, obviously I'm this one. I'm obviously this one because there is no other. And when I'm saying now this one, I mean that's the I. That's the I. That's how you know which I you are. Obviously you're this one, the only one. The next question would be, but how do you know which me you are? For example, when we're talking about the 7 billion human beings, how do you know which body belongs to you? And that's a completely different question. It's more difficult in a way. For example, if a brain scientist would show you 100 brains and tell you one of those is yours, it would not be so easy to find out which is yours. Maybe at the end of the day you would poke into them and then you would finally find out which is yours. But you wouldn't on first sight be able to identify which of those 100 brains is yours. While if the scientist would ask you which of the 100 consciousnesses that are connected to the brains is yours, the answer would be easy. This one. So how do we find out which of the 7 billion human bodies is ours? And the answer is, well, there's only one world now that I see. But I'm seeing it through these pairs of eyes. How do I know? Well, for example, I can cover the eyes and the world disappears. So obviously it's these eyes. And for some reason, these two ears through which I hear the sounds, they're connected to the same body. And when I'm trying to speak, the mouth that's moving is also connected to this body. So obviously, for some reason, this body is me. And with the eyes, the fact that these eyes see is not because I want to see, but I'm seeing the world, and for some reason it's these eyes. I'm hearing sounds right now, and it's these ears. But with the mouth, it's different, or with these arms. These eyes are the only ones that see, actually. Your eyes might also see, but actually, right now, all of the seeing that's happening is done through these eyes. All of the hearing that's done is done by these ears. But when it comes to the moving of arms and feet, not only this body is moving, but there's lots of bodies out there that are also actually moving. But Nagai says there's only one body that I can directly move. And that's the same body that has these ears and eyes and the mouth that's moving. Well, actually, this is not the only mouth that's moving and speaking. There's lots of other mouths out there that are also moving and speaking, but that's the only mouth that I can move. And that's where, in his view, free will comes in. If there would be no such thing as free will, I couldn't say there's only one body that speaks in the way I wanted to speak. I couldn't say there's only one body where I can move the arm. I could still say there's only one body where the eyes could actually see and the ears can hear, but I couldn't say the same thing about the arms and the legs. And I'm not quite sure if I agree with Nagai here. For example, I said in the beginning that for Buddhists, sometimes the idea that there's no free will comes in handy because, for example, when you do Zazen, there's this point where it doesn't feel as if you do Zazen, but Zazen does Zazen. It's not me. There is no agent in Zazen. I don't do Zazen. Zazen does Zazen. And it's, I think, even pretty easy to realize during Zazen that there's no thinker. Normally, when you think, you also think that you think, I'm thinking, or right now I'm talking. And I talk the stuff that I try to express. While I'm doing this talking, I'm also doing a certain amount of thinking, and I'm choosing about these thoughts and how to arrange them, and more or less the way I try to express it, I'm actually then expressing it by talking. But then when you sit down in Zazen on your cushion, you realize that thoughts come up without you trying to think. Actually, you might sit down with the intention to not think, and still one thought comes up after the next. And you try to maybe erase them. That's not possible. You try to ignore them. Also quite difficult. And if you just let them be, you realize they come up, they stay for a while, and they disappear again. You cannot make them disappear. You cannot also produce the thoughts. They come up, they stay, they disappear. Or if you practice mindfulness, you might sit down with the intention to just keep your mind focused on the breath. You stay with the breath and nothing else. And you do that for 30 seconds, a minute, maybe 2. If you're pretty good, maybe 3 minutes. But what usually happens is that sooner or later you start thinking. Why? Who starts to think there? You decided to stay with the breath. But somehow you start thinking, and in the beginning you're not even aware that you're thinking. But again, miraculously, after a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes, you realize, oh, I was thinking, I'm thinking. Basically, that's the instant where mindfulness happens. A lot of people, most of the time, seem to think that mindfulness happens when you stay with the breath. You kind of keep with the breath. Your mind is on the breath and there are no other thoughts. And now you're mindful. And when you start to think and then you realize, oh, I was thinking, you're out of the mindfulness. In my view, that's where true mindfulness happens. The moment you realize, I was thinking. I was lost in thoughts. That's mindfulness, but you cannot make that. So that seems to indicate that there's no free will after all. Even mindfulness happens. Even mindfulness happens. You cannot make it. So, in the example or in the context of Nagai's philosophy, he says, well, there's only one mouth I can move, and there's only two arms and two legs that I can move at free will. There's lots of other arms and legs that are moving, but only one pair of arms and one pair of legs that I can move at free will. You could say, well, rather than say I'm moving those at free will, there's only one pair of arms and one pair of legs that I cannot only see that those are moving, but I can feel it from the inside. There's only this pair where I feel it from the inside, and also at more or less the same time, simultaneously, I can feel the thought that I want to move. I feel the urge to move these arms and legs, and they're actually moving, and I can feel that, not because I see them move, but I can feel it through my physical awareness, sensory awareness. So you don't really need to incorporate the idea of a free will to connect the I to the me. On the other hand, I feel, or I think I can understand why the Buddha would say that Makkhali, who denied free will, was a foolish person. For example, again, when I'm talking right now, I'm not just observing myself. I'm not just observing Muho, how he's talking. So in a way, it's, at least to me, it feels completely different from sitting in Zazen on my cushion observing my thoughts. I'm not, as you probably are viewing this video, I'm not just looking at Muho, how he's talking, and listening to Muho, but actually I am talking. I'm talking right now. And if I wouldn't be sitting here and talking with this attitude that I'm talking, I probably couldn't talk like this. While in Zazen, I can let go of that. To think in Zazen, I don't need the idea I'm thinking here. Actually, I can observe my thoughts. And even with mindfulness, I don't have to tell myself to be mindful. I can allow mindfulness to happen. I think that's also something that Brad Warner wrote long ago. Mindfulness is happening all the time. Don't get into its way. When he says that, he's talking about this mindfulness. The mindfulness that's, you cannot produce it. You can't produce it. It's happening all of the time. And actually, the other day I also had an exchange with Brad Warner about free will, about his take on free will, and there was something interesting that he wrote. That's from a private mail, but I hope I can quote at least as much as this. Brad Warner says, I feel like Zazen has given me more free will. So some Buddhist teachers would probably say free will is just an illusion. And when you do Zazen, you realize there's no such thing as free will. Brad Warner, and I agree with him perfectly. In a certain sense, you could actually say the other thing. Zazen gives you free will. And then at the end of the mail he says, honestly, I never know how to answer questions about free will. I just act as if I have free will. That would lead us back to the question, yes, but why? Why? Why would you do that? Because you have no choice, or do you do that deliberately? Yeah. In a way, I'm kind of attracted to Nagai's idea that in a way we cannot have free will, because in a parallel world, Muho would do exactly the same thing. But when we're talking about this moment here right now, if I'm talking about Muho not as somebody who could exist in another parallel world, so when I'm talking about myself not in the third person as Muho, but as myself, when I identify with Muho, the only way this identification works is by, how do you say, subscribing to free will in a way. By subscribing to free will, that's how we identify. Or when we talk about time, we cannot change the past and the future is still open. But we cannot live tomorrow. We only can live today, and today we are free. In this way, we're identifying the now with this day, which is July 31st. It's the only day in the history of mankind where freedom exists. Only today I can act freely. Thus I connect the eternal now with this one singular point in history. And starting from that, you might or might not, how do you say, acknowledge that the same is true for others. Not only am I free in this moment, but if I want to have a meaningful relation with you, and the fact that I will upload this on YouTube later is already a proof that I believe there's another conscious being out there, and I'm relating to that other conscious being right there, means that I'm acknowledging that you are free as well. I don't have any actual proof of that freedom on your side, but I wouldn't be able to live like that. But then objectively, of course, if I think about the world from an objective perspective, there can be no such thing as freedom, including myself and yourself. But when I'm living my daily life, I'm using a completely different perspective, and I cannot help but using this different perspective. Now there's I think a student of Nagai in Japan, a philosopher named Takuo Aoyama, and unfortunately there isn't much information about him on the internet in English, but he's also spent a lot of time thinking about this problem of free will, especially connected to time, but also to first person, second person, third person. And interestingly, he comes up with, in a way, the opposite idea than Nagai. Nagai says, well, there can be only one free will. Really, actually, right now there can be only one will that's actually free. And that's my will, and only now in the present. There can be no free will yesterday and tomorrow, and there can be no free will in a third person, not even in the second person. But just as I will have probably another choice tomorrow, but I will never have another choice yesterday. So you will be just as free as I am. That means second person can be free, just as freedom is possible tomorrow. But the third person is just like yesterday. When I think about myself as a third person, as Muho in the parallel world, Muho in the parallel world cannot be free. And Aoyama, in a way, comes to the opposite conclusion, and I think he is well influenced there by a famous philosopher called Strawson, who wrote something about 50 or 60 years ago that was very influential when it comes to the question of what free will is. The article that he wrote is called Free Will and Resentment. And Strawson agrees that, well, determinism is probably true. And even if determinism isn't true, we don't have a free will in the sense that we can change the course of the world. But, and that's kind of where his argument starts. Suppose you're riding in a train, for example, and somebody steps on your foot. How would you react? Somebody steps on your foot. What's your reaction? And the answer is probably, well, it depends. If that person was just mindless and they stepped on my foot, or somebody pushed them and they stepped on my foot, or on purpose they stepped on my foot, my reaction would be different. It would be also different if it's a 3-year-old kid that's just learned how to walk that's stepping on my foot, or if it's a fully grown-up person. So why is my reaction different, and what causes the difference in the reaction? Well, if somebody pushes somebody and the person that got pushed steps on my foot, I wouldn't be angry at them. I might be angry at the person who pushed them, but I'm not angry at them because there's no free will involved. If that person was just careless and stepped on my foot, I might be annoyed and say, hey, take care. Why don't you take care? You should have taken more care. I react in a different way because although that person didn't step on my foot because they decided to do though, it wasn't their free decision. But at least I suppose, well, you could have taken care. Next time, please take care. And in the case where I suppose that they stepped on my foot deliberately, on purpose, I might also reflect on myself and say, oh, maybe I did something wrong in the past. Maybe I did something to make them angry, and now that person is stepping on my foot. And if I've nothing, and if I feel there's no obvious reason why this person is entitled to step on my foot, then I will be really angry. Who do you think you are to step on my foot? Why do you do this? I did nothing wrong to you. Why do you do this to me? And it seems that the point that Strawson is trying to make is that even if determinism is true, we have no other way to live our lives like this. We cannot get rid of these emotional patterns. And, well, I don't know if Buddhism would want us to get rid of these patterns, maybe change it to a certain degree, but I think also in Buddhism, at least not the historic Buddha Shakyamuni, wouldn't say it's the same thing if you are pushed by somebody and step on their foot, or if you do it out of carelessness, or if you do it on purpose. And in the same pattern, it doesn't mean if somebody forces you to open your purse and give them their money, or if you do it, if you drop your purse out of mindlessness, or if you give your money because you want to give it, you let go. Those are completely different acts of giving. If somebody robs you your money, or you drop your money, or you give your money, those are different actions. So in this sense, of course, we are free. So Nagai says free will starts with the first person, and from there we project it on the second person. It doesn't make any sense in the third person perspective. And Aoyama says free will starts in the second person perspective. Only when we react with another person, we come up with this idea that you could have done like this, or there must be a reason for this. This is a deliberate action, and this isn't. While when we think about ourselves in the first person, we only are, so to speak, witnesses to what we do. And we are neither free nor unfree, but Aoyama says we are a-free, or in Japanese, mujiu. We are not free, but we are not unfree. But when we realize that we are a second person to the second person, so to you, I am you. From your perspective, I'm in the second person. So I am in that sense responsible for my, or I have to take responsibility for my actions and words that I speak and do towards you. You will suppose that I'm free to say and do things, and are also free to not say and do these things. So freedom starts with the second person, and only from there we arrive at freedom at the first person. And Aoyama and Nagai, they agree that from the third person perspective there can be no freedom, because we are all determined. Third person perspective would be to look at the universe from the perspective of God. And there's no time, there are no individuals, everything, the whole plan, the whole movie is in the can, so to speak. That's Ramesh Balsekar is, I think, the name of the Indian guru. I just see it here in Brad Warner's mail. This Indian guru is also talking about free will. And there the metaphor that is used is our life and the history of the universe is like a movie. The movie is already in the can, but right now we are watching the movie and we see this one frame on the screen. And in a way, the fact that we are watching it is also part of the movie. That's where the existential dilemma comes in. Like we cannot really sit back, but when we're pretending that we are only watching a movie, we're already part of the movie. Anyway, the watcher of the movie, although in his head he understands that the movie is already in the can, I cannot change the course of the movie. There you are sitting and trying to change the course of the action. And you have to act as if you had freedom. Why? Okay, just as I thought, this became a very long video. Although I said a lot, I'm not quite sure if I actually said all of the stuff that I wanted to say. Probably once I turn off the camera, I will remember a lot of things that I actually wanted to say and I didn't. But for today, I said enough. I said enough, I think. If you want more, just as I said in the beginning, I've got 2 playlists on my channel that relate to exactly this topic. God and Zen, and why, not why, but who am I? In these two playlists that are already a couple of years old, I talk about the same topic. If you also understand German, there's lots of more videos on the topic in the German section. And if you have any thoughts, any feedback, please feel welcome to comment. And I will stay in touch. Thank you for watching and stay well.